Don Pablo's Tex Mex restaurant was once a familiar name in American casual dining, but today the question is simple and direct: what happened to them, and are any still open? For many families, Don Pablo's was not just a place to eat. It was a place of birthdays, weekend dinners, and loud tables filled with baskets of chips and bowls of salsa that never seemed to empty. The brand built its reputation on atmosphere as much as food: bright interiors, hand painted signs, open kitchens, and the sound of sizzling fajitas arriving at the table created a sense of occasion that felt larger than an ordinary weeknight meal. The chain began in the late 1980s during a period when themed casual dining was expanding rapidly across the United States. Restaurants were not simply serving food, they were selling experience. Don Pablo's leaned into a festive Tex Mex identity, blending Americanized Mexican cuisine with bold decor and high energy dining rooms. It was part of a broader wave that included chains built around specific cuisines and environments, from steakhouse concepts to seafood shacks to Southwestern themed eateries. At its height in the 1990s, Don Pablo's operated more than 100 locations across the country. It became especially strong in suburban markets, where large standalone buildings with ample parking matched the chain's footprint requirements. The menu focused on enchiladas, tacos, burritos, chimichangas, fajitas, and combination plates, along with margaritas that were marketed as part of the full experience. Expansion during that era was aggressive. Growth was fueled by investor confidence in casual dining and by consumer appetite for recognizable brands. The company changed ownership multiple times as private equity groups and restaurant operators acquired and sold portfolios of chains. During periods of economic optimism, rapid expansion was seen as proof of strength, but expansion carries risk. When a chain grows quickly, it must maintain consistent quality across dozens, then hundreds of locations. Supply chains become more complex. Labor costs rise. Real estate commitments stretch long term budgets. And consumer tastes begin to evolve. By the early 2000s, the casual dining landscape had shifted. Fast casual brands began to emerge, offering quicker service, customizable menus, and lower price points. Chipotle, for example, redefined expectations for what a Tex Mex experience could look like. Instead of table service and large dining rooms, fast casual emphasized speed and perceived freshness. The dining occasion changed. At the same time, the broader restaurant industry faced pressure from rising food costs, increased competition, and economic downturns. The recession of 2008 hit many casual dining chains particularly hard. Families cut back on discretionary spending. Large dine in restaurants with high overhead struggled to maintain profitability. Don Pablo's filed for bankruptcy more than once. Bankruptcy in the restaurant world does not always mean immediate closure. Often it is an attempt to restructure debt, renegotiate leases, and reduce the number of underperforming locations, but repeated filings can signal deeper structural issues. In Don Pablo's case, store counts gradually declined as locations closed in waves. Ownership changes continued. At different points, the brand was controlled by different parent companies attempting to stabilize operations. Each new ownership group brought plans for revitalization, menu adjustments, and operational improvements. But the competitive landscape kept shifting. Consumers were becoming more selective. The rise of social media changed how restaurants were evaluated. Independent Mexican and Tex Mex restaurants gained visibility. Delivery platforms reshaped convenience. Fast casual concepts continued to expand. Large themed dining rooms no longer guaranteed traffic the way they once had. By the mid 2010s, Don Pablo's footprint had shrunk dramatically. What was once a nationwide presence became a small collection of remaining stores. In 2017, the company's parent entity again sought bankruptcy protection. Locations closed across multiple states. The restructuring reduced the brand to only a handful of restaurants. In 2019, the final remaining Don Pablo's locations closed their doors. At that point, the brand effectively ceased operations. As of today, there are no Don Pablo's restaurants still open. For many people, that realization comes as a surprise. The brand was so visible for so long that it feels like it should still exist somewhere. But restaurant chains often fade quietly. A location closes in one city, another closes months later in a different state. Eventually, the footprint becomes too small to sustain national awareness. The story of Don Pablo's is not unique, but it is instructive. It illustrates how restaurant success depends on more than brand recognition. It depends on adaptability. Consumer preferences shift toward convenience, health consciousness, value pricing, and digital integration. Chains that fail to evolve quickly enough often struggle to maintain relevance. There is also the issue of scale. Large casual dining restaurants carry significant fixed costs. Real estate, utilities, staffing, and inventory must be supported by consistent traffic. When traffic declines, the cost structure becomes difficult to manage. Smaller, more flexible concepts often weather downturns more easily. Nostalgia plays an interesting role in the conversation. Many former guests remember Don Pablo's fondly. They remember the tortillas made fresh, the festive interiors, the birthday celebrations with sombreros and songs. Nostalgia can create the impression that a brand should still be viable, but nostalgia does not always translate into sustained revenue. The broader Tex Mex category remains strong. Independent restaurants thrive, regional chains succeed, fast casual models dominate in many markets. The cuisine did not disappear, the format changed. In examining what happened, it becomes clear that Don Pablo's was built for a particular era of dining. Large themed restaurants, high energy service, and expansion driven by real estate development were hallmarks of the 1990s. As consumer behavior evolved, the model required reinvention. Whether due to financial constraints, ownership instability, or competitive pressure, that reinvention never fully took hold. Restaurant closures often feel personal. People associate food with memory. When a chain disappears, it can feel like a piece of a particular time has ended. For former employees, closures represent lost jobs and disrupted careers. For communities, empty restaurant buildings become visible reminders of economic change. The final closures in 2019 marked the end of the Don Pablo's era. There have been no official announcements of a national revival. Occasionally, former brands are resurrected under new ownership, sometimes in a limited capacity. But as of now, Don Pablo's does not operate any open locations. The restaurant industry remains one of the most competitive sectors in retail. Margins are thin, trends move quickly, success requires constant adaptation. Brands that once dominated suburban corridors can fade within a decade if they cannot align with new expectations. Don Pablo's story is a reminder of how dynamic the industry truly is. It is also a reminder that even well known brands are not permanent fixtures. They exist within economic cycles, consumer habits, and competitive ecosystems that are always shifting. So the answer is straightforward. Don Pablo's expanded rapidly in the 1990s, struggled through changing market conditions and multiple bankruptcies in the 2000s, and ultimately closed its final locations in 2019. There are no Don Pablo's restaurants still open today. What remains are memories, recipes recreated at home, and a chapter in the history of American casual dining that reflects both ambition and the realities of a changing marketplace.